Hello, and welcome to the next video in the Unity Mega Man series. This is video number 38, and this video we're going to be doing ladders. And it's a very important game mechanic that I've been saving towards the end, and we're going to need it for our final video, which is going to be recreating the Bomb Man level, because there's plenty of ladders in that. So we're going to be able to move up and down ladders. We're going to have ladders above ladders, ladders to the side of ladders. We're going to be able to shoot while we're on the ladder, throw bombs while we're on the ladder, and get knocked off the ladder if we, get hit by an enemy. So we're going to try and cover every aspect that'll have to do with being on the ladder and ladder movement, and going up and touching the ground, going up and getting to the top of the ladder, etc. So let's take a look at the project. And I basically do pretty much everything over in this in the Bomb Man stage, but I also did it in the main scene or for the 16:9 resolution. So let's just take a look here what we're going to have. And so I have a Kamodoma at the top so we can see what goes on with that. And so we can jump on the ladder, we can go up, we can go down, we can get to the end of a ladder, fall off, we can go up, touch the ground, you can get hit and knocked off the ladder. Then we can get up, shoot, and run across the ladder. We can jump up on a ladder, go up to the top, and go down from ladder to ladder, and then jump up, all the way up, jump, go down, and while we're on the ladder, we can shoot the ladder, etc. Up, down. Every case that we could possibly think of that has to do with being on a ladder. And you'll notice when we get up to the top, there's this little transition that we do to show that we're kind of climbing up. And when we go down, a transition to show that we're going down. So that's going to be what we're going to be working on today with our ladders. So let's get started. Okay, we're back. So I have the previous project open, number 37, which was Gabriel, the enemy that travels back and forth. So if you've been following along, you can open up your previous projects, and if you haven't been following, I mean, there's a whole lot of videos before this one. And so, but if you're only interested in how to do ladder climbing, you don't really need to have followed the series at all, because it's pretty much just the logic behind climbing a ladder, and you can do your own animations. So there's really no prerequisite to doing this ladder video. But if you have been following, obviously open up your project so you can continue along. But if not, all the source code is up on my GitHub, so you can go and check that. Links in the description. And so from that point, we're going to get started. But I'd like to start with saying first that this is actually like my third attempt at building ladder code and everything like that. My first time was pretty pathetic, to say the least, but it worked. But it had a lot of issues. My second version was better, but there were still these little glitches that would happen when you're exiting the ladder. Get up to the top, it would show that you'd do his jump animation for like a frame or whatever, because the ground check code wasn't doing stuff right and things like that. But I'm very happy with my third version now that we're going to be doing in this video, which is so it's actually really good. I haven't noticed any glitches or anything like that. And when you get up to the top, he's like right there. When you get down the bottom, he's right there as well. So, and then getting on the ladder, getting off and falling off and climbing up and this and that and doing the transition and all that, everything's pretty good. So pretty solid in my opinion. So I've watched other people's videos, like a handful of videos, and read a couple articles just to get ideas, like maybe I'm missing something when I'm doing my ladder stuff, why this stuff doesn't check out. But what I've noticed with a lot of people's stuff, and I'm not criticizing anybody's work, because that's the last thing I want anybody to do about my work, but I feel every time I watch or read somebody else's thing, it's like I feel there's something missing, So it's like, okay, you get on the ladder, when you're on the ladder moving up and down, that's like the easy part, no problem, right? But when you get up to the top, it's like the exit, right? It's like, okay, so we're exiting. Well, how do we get back down? Some people, they don't get into that detail, or while you're on the ladder, how do you shoot while you're on the ladder, or if you're on the ladder, if you get hit by an enemy, how do you get knocked off, things like that, you know. So in my video, which you probably notice all my other videos, they're very long because I try to be as detailed as possible. So this video is no different. So this ladder video, I don't know how long it's going to end up being because I'm recording it right now, but it might turn into a long one because I'm going to try and cover pretty much a lot of cases that have to do with being on the ladder and the control of being on the ladder and all that stuff. So we're going to see how this turns out, but I think hopefully you'll be like the end result. So that all said, let's this is the previous project. So what we're going to do is I'm going to import a couple changes, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I've switched over to the Bomb Man stage, and I've imported some of the changes. I'm not going to go too much into how to build the animations, because if you've watched any of my other videos, then it's pretty straightforward, and you can just watch those. But we're gonna, I'll just go over it real quick. So we're going to use the same player sprite sheet that I've been using throughout the series, which is in the assets folder. So if we go to the sprite editor, the only frames that we're interested in is this one in the top right here, which I name as player climb. And then I basically set the pivot down to the bottom center, so it's pretty much like in the middle between his legs. The other frame that I use is the one when he's on the ladder and he's shooting, and this one I called climb shoot. And this one I have as a custom pivot, because it's not exactly, I move it so it's in the center between his legs, so it's matching here, so he stays the same when he's moving, he switches his animation, so the same is in the same position. So that's how I put it, 0.3325. The next one that I end up using is the one where he basically throws. So this is like when he's throwing a bomb when he's on the ladder. So this one I call climb throw, and same pivot as the last one, 0.3325, so it's custom. And then this last one here, which is actually the animation that I use for him climbing to the top, and so as soon as he's getting up to the top of the ladder, it transitions into this before he basically makes it up to the very top. And then I use the same one when he's coming down, so it kind of gives it a little bit of a nice touch to show he doesn't just gets to a certain point, poof, poof, all of a sudden he's magically at the top of the ladder. So it kind of gives it a little bit of a transition into being at the top of the ladder. And this one is matching like the first one when he's on the ladder, so it's going to be the pivot in the bottom center. So you're going to want these 4 frames, or for whatever sprite sheet you're using, you're going to need to get your frames out. And then outside of that, I created some animations. So if we go into the animations, and on our player, which we haven't been in for quite a while now, we just open up the player. So these are, can't really tell, it's kind of small, but so the new ones are down here. So I added this new one called player climb, and let me just move that out of the way. So we're going to have a player climb animation, the player climb top animation, climb shoot, and the climb throw. So the climb, we take a look at this so we can see what happens. So the climb sprite is just the one, but what I end up doing is, let's expand that down. What I end up doing is when he's on the ladder and he's moving up it, you'll notice that he basically, his legs move up and down both sides. So it simulates that he's moving up or down the ladder. So the way I accomplish that is I just flip the sprite. I don't do the transform in this case, because where transform is going to be more to flip the sprite or flipping the transform when he's shooting, because you have this this transform here that basically is his position or where he's going to be shooting from. So I basically flip the transform when he's on the ladder for when he's going to shoot, but when he's just moving up and down the ladder, all I do is flip the sprite. So now I had to change the box collider, and this kind of like leads me into the video that's coming after this. Is actually going to be a whole bunch of changes that I want before the finale. So part of the changes is actually resizing his box collider and some offsets and things like that. So for this is kind of a little bit more bloated than it's going to be in the next video. But this is just so that I can get him to fit in the 4:3 resolution and the size between these tiles and everything like that. So I'm kind of like got these things kind of in the animation right now, but a lot of this stuff's going to basically disappear in the next video. So I'm just kind of throwing them in there now. So I changed his Y offset size on his box collider. So if I was to actually switch it over to the climb, for instance, and we just preview it. So his box collider is a lot smaller here, and the Y position, we're going to move it so it's here. And then the X and the Y size, and basically when you play it, you'll see that that's how he basically looks like he's moving up and down, or he's moving his legs, so it's like he's climbing. So we're simulating it through flipping the sprite back and forth. So that's the climb sprite. I set it at 8 samples, and it's just basically 2 frames back and forth. Now the climb, we'll do the climb top when he gets to the top. So when he gets to the top, he's basically here, and because it doesn't play for a lot long, it doesn't actually really show the animated. I only show one scene, and plus it's kind of fast. You don't really kind of see it totally in action, but that's okay. You know, it's just to give it the illusion that he's climbing up and he's basically bending over to get up from the ladder or down from the top on back onto the ladder. So in this case, same dimensions, same flipping if it happens to run long enough to play the other frame. So that's basically what it'll look like when he's getting up to the top, you know, off of the ladder or down from the onto it again. And then we have the, let's see here, the climb shoot, and in this case there's just the one, and we modify the bullet shoot position, and I'm actually probably going to move this more out over here once I do in the next video, because it's kind of like too far over, but that's okay. It's just the concept that we're talking about right now. So same offset and size and everything. So this is the box collider here, and we move the transform, and this is only one frame, so he's going to be shooting from there. And if we're on the ladder and we go the opposite direction, that's when the transform is going to flip. So we're going to use our flip method, and he's going to go the other way, so the transform translates along with the flip. And then the throw, it's just like the shoot, same thing. So same dimension, same position, everything like that. So those are the 4 animations that we're going to be using for this ladder climbing exercise. The next thing we're going to do is, now I've already created it, and the last article that I read where I got some, you could say, inspiration. I mean, I didn't like copy it verbatim or anything like that. I just kind of looked it over. I was like, all right, so they had a pretty good ladder climbing stuff in it, but I couldn't get it to work with my project. It just wasn't working right based off, I don't know what they're having, because there's no project available for it. It's just one article on their ladder climbing. Anyway, I'm not going to link to it, but it's Pav Creations. If you look it up, you can go read that article. And that's basically, so if you see some of the similarity in some of the code, like very little of the code, that's where it came from. So mostly it's just for the ladder, just getting, you know, checking for the positions and the awake function for the ladder script. So the rest of it's all me. So if we go to our scripts, that's when you're going to create a new script, and what it would be called, you can call it whatever you want, but I call it ladder script. And if we go over into here, so this is the ladder script. Now what I do is, if we look at, let's just bring this over. Can't really tell, but I can't really play it at the moment. But this ladder, this is the ladder here. You're going to have a top to the ladder and a bottom to the ladder, and then you're also going to have this one other that's going to be basically where I call it the platform. So basically where you get off and then you can stand on top of the ladder. So there's basically like 3 transforms associated. We're going to get to the game object right after this. But the handler that I call the top offset handler and the bottom offset handler, this has to do with where it's above the top or above the bottom of the ladder. This is the trigger point of when I want to start to transition, or that's if you're going up, or it's when you want to fall off the ladder. Now some ladders, they're always touching the ground. but there are other ladders where they're not. Maybe they're above the ground, like in this case right here. This one doesn't touch the ground, but the one behind this. So actually, maybe I can just hide this real quick. This one. This one actually extends all the way to the bottom. So this is when you're coming down, so there's the handler, right? So you're going to have a top handler that's like above the ladder. So as soon as you hit this position here, that's going to be like the cue, hey, maybe do the transition. So you're going to transition up a little bit, and then you're going to, boom, you're at the top of the ladder. And then you're going to have the bottom offset handler, which would be maybe not exactly at the very bottom, but above it. So when you're climbing down and you still have a little bit of the top of your sprite still showing here, and then we get past that handler there, boom, then you would fall off. And if it were actually have the ladder extending to the ground, you would never actually pass that point. So that's where, okay, I'm grounded now, so I should get off the ladder. I'm touching the ground. So there's two cases for when you're going down, but when you go up, it's the same. It's just one case. Go past that top handler, and boom, you're on the top of the ladder. Now, originally when I wrote this, I had everything, I had both of these the same. Well, maybe you want to do, I split it up so that you have a top and a bottom. So that maybe you want to have the bottom at a different offset versus the top. So you can play around with that if you want. And then in here, we're going to have a public rule called is near ladder. This is a cue for saying, okay, we're near the ladder, so yeah, if you want to get on it, you can get on it. So, and then I have all these positions. So this is basically the X position of the transform of the ladder. So the game object, it's going to be a game object with 3 children on it. So this is basically the X position, which should be the center of the ladder, the very center of the ladder. And then you have the position of the top Y, which is the top of the ladder, the bottom Y, which is the bottom of the ladder, and then the handler Y, which is basically the top of the ladder plus the offset, and then the bottom of the handler, or the bottom of the ladder plus the Y offset handler, and then the position of the Y for the platform, which is basically where you're going to be standing on top of the ladder. And that seems a little confusing at first, but when you see it in action, it'll make more sense. And so what we're going to do in here is we're going to call the awake function. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the box collider that's on our ladder. And then we're going to get the size of the box collider. And then we're going to get each of these transforms. So one's called the ladder, the top of the ladder, the bottom of the ladder, and the platform of the ladder. So we're just going to get all those transforms. And now technically, you don't really need the transform for the top and the bottom, but I leave them in here because they're more visual cues for when you're debugging and stuff like that, and you'll see it when I run the project. But there's these little diamonds that I basically set. Can't see them right now, but here, right here. I have these little diamonds here that basically denote where these offsets are, or these positions are. So like these purple diamonds is basically, this is where the bottom of the ladder is, and this is where the top of the ladder is. And then this green diamond is basically, oh, that's where the platform is. So I leave them in there as visual cues, the top and the bottom. Now the other one you do need, because that's basically where your ground and your edge collider and everything is. And then from that point, once I have all those transforms, then we're going to set the top of the ladder to the half the size above the middle of the ladder, and then the bottom. So this is similar to the article I was mentioning, this part here. And this part is just basically storing all these positions internally in the ladder script, so the player can access it. And that's why they're all public up here, so you can get at them. And we basically build them out so that you can use them for your calculations and your ladder code. So the ladder basically maintains all the positions, and all the other code is going to be in the player for actually the logic moving up and down the ladder. So I kind of broke it into this and here, this and that. And so then you have the trigger stay 2D, and what we're going to be looking for is the player. So if the player enters the trigger, what we're going to do is we're going to set our is near ladder rule here, but we're only going to set it to true if the player happens to be, so what's going to happen is we know that the middle down the ladder, so I'm going to have a little bit to the left in the middle and a little bit of the right in the middle. So it's kind of like a sliver right down the middle of the ladder. So when the player gets within that sliver, then that's when it's like, oh, okay, you're near the ladder, so you should start climbing if you want. Some tutorials, as soon as you're in the ladder, you can start climbing. Well, we don't want our player halfway outside the ladder to start climbing. So that's why I have it so basically a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. So once you're pretty much close to the middle of the ladder, that's the cue that's like, okay, you can start climbing. And when you do start climbing, then you basically, we're going to set the player to the middle of the ladder. But as long as you're close to the middle, you should be able to get into that ladder and start climbing on it. And so that's what this check does. You're going to see with the players within that little bit of a boundary. And then what we have here is if this is all true, players within in this area like to on the trigger, we're going to set the ladder script which is in the player, and ignore this because the player doesn't have that code in there yet. But we're going to set this ladder script into the player so that the player can access these variables. Then we have the on trigger exit. So once you're outside of the ladder, what we're going to do is if it's the player, then we're going to say, okay, well, obviously if you're outside of this ladder, we don't want you to be near it. And we're going to basically set the ladder script inside the player to null. So that'll be the cue. Oh, okay, can't get on a ladder anymore. So that's basically the ladder script in action. Really small, really simple, really short. But the main core is actually inside the player. So I'm going to come over here. We're going to bring over some code. Let's see here. All right, so what I'm probably going to do is I'm just going to bring this over into the project. I might just talk about this just real quick because this is the big chunk right here, which actually has to do with all the climbing stuff. But we're going to introduce a new bool that's called isClimbing. So we're going to bring that in. And then I have some ladder climbing variables here, transform y, so we don't have to keep doing like transform.position.y all the time. So we're going to store it in this shorter variable here called transform y. And then this transform hy, which is basically, I consider the transform y plus the height of the sprite. So that's why it's transform hy. So that's basically kind of like the top. The y is the bottom because I have my pivot at the bottom of the player. Well, this is the top of the player. So that's what the hy version is for. Then I have this bool here that says it's climbing down. We're going to get to that. Whether we've hit the ladder's end or not, so end being the top of the ladder or the very bottom of the ladder. And then I have some control variables here. Has started climbing, started to climb transition, and if we finish the climb transition. So some variables here for the ladder climbing. And then this is a reference to the ladder, which was at this setting over in the ladder script. This is my climb speed. I put in a point of 0.35. And then what I have here is a ladder settings, which is actually the height of the sprite. Now, I hard code this because the heights of the sprites can change during the animations and everything like that, so I feel that they should be constant. So I have this variable here where I can specify the actual height of the sprite. So it's always constant regardless of which animation frame I'm on and which sprite's being played. So that's why I do this, and it keeps it more consistent, I feel, because one sprite might be 29, or this one might be 24, and then if you're on this frame of that animation, you're checking that, and it doesn't match up, then things might go kind of wonky. So that's what the point of this is. So I'm going to use a constant for the height of my sprite, and we're going to see that in action too. And I'll get to this in a little bit. Basically, I end up changing the raycast distance. Normally it was 0.05 or 0.05. Well, I kind of shrink it up so it's half of that, and it has to do with the tile map and everything like that. And the ladder was kind of acting a little weird when the raycast was a little bit too long. The box cast came down a little too far. So, and then this is all the code for the movement. We're going to skip all that. And then I have a function called reset climbing. So when we switch our weapon, we're going to want to reset our climbing, because if we're on a ladder and we do like the weapons menu, if you play the original, if he does that, he actually starts falling off the ladder. So that's what that's for. And then if we start in our start damage animation, so when we get hit by an enemy, we're going to reset climbing. So that basically says, oh, hit by an enemy, fall off the ladder. And then down here we have all this other stuff which actually has to do with the start climbing, and then we're going to get into this. So I'm going to bring it on all those changes first, and I'll be right back. Okay, so let's get back over to the code here. So all the movement for the ladder I have inside of player movement. At the very top here, I get the current Y position of my transform for the player. And then what I do is I take that Y transform and I add on that fixed height for the sprite. And I put that over in the transform HY variable. And then what I have here inside of is climbing. So this block, so this was the, let's see down here. This was the original block that's been in, that we've been using for all of our movement and jumping around and things like that. It's all down here. So I didn't want to try and integrate climbing code into this because it's just going to become a really jumbled mess. So what I ended up doing was I just separated this. So all the climbing stuff, so if there's climbing involved, it's all up here. Otherwise, if there is no climbing, then all of our original code is down here. So there's no changes other than this at the bottom of that. Just check and see if we can start climbing a ladder or not. So once the ladder script detects that the player is within that boundary, and then it's going to set the is ladder not to to this, which is basically a reference to the ladder script. And so if this isn't null, then what we want to do is see if the player is within that little sliver of the boundary. So if the player is this is climbing up, by the way. So if the player is within that little sliver and we're pressing the up key on the keyboard and our Y plus the height of the sprite is less than the top handler, which is basically the top of the top handler, so the top plus the offset. So that's when we want to be able to start climbing up. Because you can jump onto a ladder and catch it somewhere. As long as you're below the top of it, just the top handler, then we're going to want to be able to climb upward. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to set the is climbing to true, is climbing down to false, obviously, because we're going to be going up. And then we're going to set our animator speed initially to 0 so that there's no movement with the animation, our climb animation that we're going to play. Now, this is where people have different takes on this aspect. You're going to see, if you watch other videos and you see other people do ladder climbing, it's either going to be, for the most part, it's always these two cases. You're either going to set your gravity scale to 0 and defy gravity for moving up and down on the ladder, or you can basically set your body type, your rigid body type, to kinematic, and so you can just basically move your transform around and stuff like that. So I go with the kinematic approach versus the I originally did the gravity scale, but I like the kinematic approach, my personal opinion, of course. And then I'm going to set my velocity to 0, so if I happen to jump on, I'm going to kill the velocity on that. And then I'm going to set my transform to the X position of the ladder. So like I said, inside the ladder, the X position should be right down the middle of the ladder. So we're going to move ourselves right to the middle of the ladder. So we should be lined up in the center of the ladder. And our Y position plus this little bit of an offset here, just so that we get up on the ladder a little bit. So where our feet are above the very bottom. If we happen to walk up the ladder, for instance, if we're standing at the base of the ladder and we start walking up it, then this is going to go above it. And if we jump on it, it's going to go above it a little bit too. So we're going to move ourselves a little bit up. And then we're going to start this thing that says start climbing, which we will talk about in a little bit. Now the opposite is climbing down. So if we're above the ladder, then we're going to see, are we near it, which we should be, and if we are, then we're gonna, if we're pressing down key on, down on the keyboard, which is our key vertical, so that should be like -1 basically. If we're pressing down, then we're gonna check and see if we're grounded. So if we're, for some strange reason, if some frame didn't catch up or whatever, we want to make sure that we're grounded. So we jump up and press down. We don't want to all magically boom, we're on the ladder, because that could possibly happen. It has happened. So we want to make sure that we're grounded, so that then we can start moving down the ladder. And then we're going to check our transform HY and see if it's greater than the top handler. So if it's greater than the top handler, it basically means we're standing above it, and that'd be like the top of our sprite, and the offset would be somewhere like, depending, maybe like in the middle of the chest area. We'll see that with the diamonds and everything. But the top offset, above the body. So you should technically, with the height of the sprite and being above the Y or the top of the ladder, you should be above this. So this is when we want to signal, oh, okay, we can start moving down. So we're going to say is climbing is true. Is climbing down is true because we're moving down. And the reason this whole is climbing down thing is to do the transition to move downward. And then we're going to set the animated speed to 0. Kinematic, same thing as before. And then what we're going to do is set ourselves to the middle of the ladder. And then we're going to set to the transform Y. So, and then we're going to do the climb transition. I pass it false, and we're going to see why, because it's basically a bool that's called is moving up. So we don't want to be moving up, we're going to be moving down. So that is that. So let's just take a look at while we're climbing. So, okay. Inside of our player movement is climbing. So if we're climbing on a ladder, it's going to do all this big chunk of code right here. So let's just start from the very beginning with this. So I have some lines that I draw. These basics, so you can kind of see where the handlers are, and the top of the sprite with the transform HY and the transform Y. So I have all these lines that basically are shown on the I forgot what that the scene screen instead of the game screen. So these are like debug lines, so you can see what's going on when you're moving up and down the ladder. So you can basically see all these lines. So what we're going to do here, first check, we're going to see if the transform HY is greater than the top handler. So if it's basically you're on the ladder and you just pass that top handler, we're going to execute this code. So right now, this is only going to happen if we're not climbing down. But if you basically press down, then we'd be climbing down and then it wouldn't execute it. But if you're going up, then we're going to want to execute this. So we're going to see if we started the climb transition. So if we haven't, then we're going to set this so we only run this once. So we're going to call this climb transition, and pass it true, which basically means moving up. So it's going to be that little transition moving up. So this is when we're going up a ladder, remember. So once that transition is done, then it's going to come down through here, and we're going to set is jumping to vaults, because if you actually move up to the top of the ladder and you don't set this, you might get the jump landed sound. So this is to make sure that that sound doesn't play. We're going to set our animator to, or going to play our idle animation. We're going to reposition ourselves to the top of the platform with a little bit of an offset so it doesn't show him moving up a little bit. And then we're going to see if it's not at the ladder's end, which it shouldn't be at the beginning, but it's going to be now. And then we're going to call our reset climbing. But we're going to have a little bit of a delay on it. So this is to let the rigid body and the ground check and all that stuff to kind of catch up. So when you're moving around, you'll probably notice at times that the rigid body doesn't kind of follow along with the box collider. It's probably a bad way of saying it, but it's not like always in sync, because it's running at a different, fixed update's running at a different speed than regular update. So what I have here, and this is one of the things I've noticed, is to solve the problem of the ground check and the possible flicker of a jump animation, like there'll be a frame where it shows, boom, you're jumping, but you're not really jumping. It's because the ground check hasn't been able to catch up yet, because the fixed update's running at a different time. So this actually kind of solves that little bit of an issue. So we call reset climbing, but we're going to have a delay, so it gives the ground check a chance to catch up. And then we check for ground. So that's if we're climbing up a ladder but not going down from the top. We're just going up, so we just went up. The other case is if we're going below the bottom handler. So then we're going to basically call reset climb by itself. We don't need any kind of delay on this. And then this is basically the part where we're in the middle of the ladder, we're even going up and down and stuff like that. But we're not climbing down. What we're going to do is we're going to see, can we jump? If we're going to, we hit the jump key, but we want to make sure that up or down isn't pressed. So this is kind of one of those checking to make sure somebody's not holding the up key and pressing jump, and you got this jump flicker, kind of just jumping up the ladder like that. So as long as there's no vertical input being supplied, then the key jump should basically let you go of the ladder and you could fall down. So if you want to modify that for your game so you can jump upward while you are on a ladder, you can change that up. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to check if we are grounded, and then we're going to check and see this has started climbing. So this is kind of this is actually part of a coroutine, and this is where we're going to be seeing if it kind of a delay to make sure that our box collider and our box cast and all that is caught up with our fixed update and everything. So this is to prevent another type of flicker in our animation, whether we're grounded or not. So this is a check here to help that out. So this is the opposite. This is going down. So is jumping, we're going to set to nothing. We're going to set it to the player idle animation. We're going to go to the bottom of the ladder, minus a little bit to set our transform. And now that we're at the ladder's end here, we're going to do the reset climbing here with the short of a delay to let the ground check catch up. And so then, actually that was to go down. So here is actually while we're moving in the middle of the ladder. So what we're going to do here, animate, we're going to basically change our animator speed. So if we're pressing up, it's going to be a pause, it's going to be a 1. If we're pressing down, it's a -1. If we're not pressing up or down, it's a 0. So whether we're going up or we're going down, we're going to set our animator speed to 1. So we just take the absolute value of key vertical and set our animator speed. So if we're going up, it'll animate. If we're going down, it'll animate. If we're not moving at all, animator speed will end up being 0. And so then what we're going to do is if we're going to check if key vertical is not 0, which basically means we're going either up or down, and we're not shooting, that's when we're going to want to be able to move. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, we're going to set this thing called a climb direction. And I'm going to take my climb speed and times it by my key vertical. So it's either going to be times 1 or times -1, depending if we're going up or down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change times that by delta time, so it's like moves with the time. And then we're going to add that to my position, so it's going to go up, or he's going to start moving up, or he's going to start moving down. Now down here is where the shooting comes into play. So if I'm shooting or if I'm throwing, we're going to do this block of code here. But if we're not shooting or throwing, then we're just going to play our regular player climb animation, so him moving up and down. But if we are shooting or throwing, we're going to see while we're shooting or throwing, if we're pressing left but facing right, he's going to flip, and opposite if he's facing right left and not go right, etc. So we've used this before. And then what we're going to do is if we're shooting, we're going to play the climb shoot animation. If we're throwing, we're going to do the climb throw animation. And that's pretty much it for the ladder code. So to see it in action, it's kind of, we have to see the other functions. Actually, this whole started the coroutines I was talking about. So let me get down to those. They're down here somewhere. Here we go. So we start off with started climbing. So this is a wrapper for right here. So started climbing, we're going to call this coroutine. So we're going to say his has started climbing equals true. So there was a check up there, but D is grounded. So if has started climbing is true, we're going to wait 0.1 seconds, and then we're going to set it to false. So this helps us avoid a flicker with basically a false positive on the ground check. So it gives us a chance to not have a flicker of a different animation in between. So that kind of solves that problem. The other part is the reset climbing here, which basically means if we are climbing, then what we're going to do is we're just going to say, okay, we're not climbing anymore, and we're reset these variables back to false. So not at a ladder's end, started climbing is false, finished climbing is false. We're going to set the animator speed back to 1, and we're going to set our rigid body back to dynamic. And technically, I don't think this is even necessary, but I do it anyway. I set the velocity back to 0. So after that, we have the actual climb transition animation, and all this is they're either going to be moving up. It's either a moving up transition or it's a moving down transition, and we call this coroutine, which is right down here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to freeze the input. So during this transition, I don't want any input. So I don't want to be able to shoot. This should be able to play through without any interruption from the player input. And then we're going to say here is finish the climb animation. We're going to set this to false because it's not finished yet. And so we're going to start our new position at 0, and we're going to see. So if we are moving up in the transition, we pass that top handler up there, and we're going to be moving up. And so we're going to take our Y plus the top handler offset, and we're going to move up, and that'll be our new position. But if we're moving down, what we're going to do is we're going to take our top handler Y minus our sprite height, and then add on the top handler offset, and then we're going to set that's where we're going to move him to. So we're going to move him to that spot, but then we're going to actually do a transition to this position here, which is going to be the top handler Y minus the sprite height. So it's kind of the opposite of this up here, basically. And so while our transform is not equal to the new position, we're going to use move towards. So whatever our current position is towards the new position at climb speed times delta time. And then we're going to play that climb top animation. And so it's going to loop through this until position is equal to new position. So once that happens, we're going to say is climbing down is equal to false, if that happened to be, we're going down when this happens. And then finished climb animation to true, and that would go into the top part of the is climbing section. And then we're going to give the player input back to the player so they can shoot and run and all that, and jump and do whatever else. So that's basically the ladder climbing code. I know it's kind of have to wrap your head around it a little bit, but let's just zoom this out. Let's just go in here and take a look at this. So I'm going to play it. And hopefully I imported everything where this isn't going to break. This actually should be, hold on one sec, let's redo that. There we go. Let's bring this over. Okay, so I'm going to, if we look at this, I'm just going to jump onto the ladder first. Okay, so I have these, I don't know if you can really tell, maybe I should just bring this up so it's a little bit bigger. You have these blue lines here. These blue lines, this is the top, basically the top of the ladder plus the top handler offset. This is the bottom of the ladder plus the bottom handler offset. So this is basically, once he passes this point, that's when the animate up or the transition, climb transition up is going to go into effect and move him up. So if I actually go up here, I'm going to go up, and you see the purple line is basically the transform HY. And then this, magenta line. And this other magenta line down here is basically transform Y. So this is the very bottom, this is basically where the pivot is of the sprite. So if I come up here and I pass that line, he does his transition and moves up. So if I come down, and so this is where coming down is important. If I press down, you can see he'll go below. Is climbing down is going to be true. So therefore, all that code in there that basically makes, checks for him moving up when he's at this, when he goes past the top handler there, it's not going to be executed because that's going to be, it's bad. It's going to defeat the purpose. So all that code with is climbing down is false. Is not going to get executed. So we kind of skip all that, and he's just going to move down, so it doesn't cause any problems. So now I'm going to come back up, and I'm going to go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, etc. So then I'm going to come down here. So now this is the bottom of the ladder plus the bottom offset handler. So I can come down here, and you can see that my transform Y is past that. Well, what it's looking for is to see if my transform HY has passed this. And if it has passed this, then that's when I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm not touching the ground, so that's going to be, it's going to basically call reset climbing and have me let go of the ladder. And there, I let go of the ladder. So on the other hand, if you come over to this, you can see that the bottom of the ladder plus the handler offset there is never going to pass this point here because I'm taller than this. So that's when the is grounded check is going to kick in. And if the grounded check, then it's just going to get me out of the climbing from that point. So I'm going to come down here, touch the ground, and then I touch the ground. Go down, up, climb up, go down, climb up, go down, etc. So I can jump, grab onto the ladder, come off, jump, grab the ladder, go off, I can jump, grab the ladder, and then just go all the way down. So inside my take damage, I'm just going to get hit by this Kamodoma real quick. Boom, hit reset, take damage, knocks me off the ladder. And if I'm on the ladder, I can shoot. Now ignore the size of my giant bullets because this is still all built around being a 16:9 resolution. That's going to be part of my resolution for the next video. But shoot, 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 hold right, shoot, 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 shoot. So there, that's shooting on the ladder. So I'm gonna let go. So I can go up here, get knocked off by that guy. I'm gonna come up here, and I'm just gonna kill him real quick. So I'm on the top of the ladder. So I'm touching this. So this is my cue. Is like, oh, okay. Well, I should be able to climb down. So if I actually jump and press down, nothing would happen. Can't really tell from there, but jump, press down. Jump, holding down, jump, holding down, and then jump, press up. So we can go down, and you can see here is where the platform and everything is. We're going to get to the actual, that's all great and everything, but how do you make all this work, right? Well, we're going to get to the prefab, the ladder prefab. We're going to take a look at what that looks like. Anyway, so once we go up, we can climb down. And then we can come over to this ladder, go up and down. I can jump up, go over. I can run across, no problem. I can basically check out a ladder above. And then you can see it, let go. So the magenta line is going to go past the offset at the bottom. Oop, let go. And I can up. Down, and I can actually jump. Actually, let me do that again. Jump, grab, and he climbs up. And then I can hold down, I can hold up, jump and hold up, jump, hold down, etc. So that's the ladder climbing in action. So I can go all over the place, I can jump up, run around on my ladders, and go up and over, etc. So anyway, that's that. Let me do the one more thing, which actually has to do with the bomb throwing. Just give myself the bomb, because we saw the shoot. Actually, let me do this real quick. So I'm going to go on the ladder. And part of it's also, if you're on the ladder and you use your weapons menu, you should basically get knocked off the ladder, which is true. So if you play the original, it'll do that too. So I'm going to throw my bomb. Ignore the side of the bomb, it's really big. So that's basically my bomb throwing. So my throwing climb animation. Alright, so prefab. Let's go take a look at the prefab. So actually before we take a look at the prefab, here, let's go to the ladders. Ignore all these other ladders right now. We're going to ladder 1 test, which is basically this ladder here, and then the other ladder, I think this is considered number 2 up here, and then this is number 3. So, actually, yeah, I think this is, yeah, here's the green line here. So this is ladder number 1. So this is composed of a top, which is basically where this purple diamond is up here. A bottom, which is this purple diamond right there. And then the top platform, which is actually right there, this green diamond. So with the top, if we just actually look at just the plain ladder by itself. So all this ladder is composed of is a box collider, which is set as a trigger, with the width set to 0.16, which is basically the size of a tile. So it's the width of a tile. Now this is on a tile map, so it's the width of the tile. And then the height is 0.96, which is basically the size of this entire ladder here. and then the ladder script is attached, and I don't modify my handler offsets, but you can do that if you want. And I also have a tag, so although I don't really use the tags for the ladder, but if you needed to search out your ladders with finding the objects and all that, then you can search for the tag ladder. But I tag the ladders, even though I don't really use the tags. And let's see here, top. So the top is basically the top of the ladder. So the script will automatically move the transforms into their positions, but I just initially set them because they're not going to change. I mean, I don't have dynamic ladders. That'd actually be kind of interesting if I had ladders where parts of the ladders would start decaying or disappearing, and you would force you to have to move up, and then you'd have to basically keep changing this on the fly, and then removing the tiles or changing the size of the sprite or whatever. So that's actually kind of interesting. I might actually try that later. But right now they're static. They're static heights set for these ladders. So it's basically the half of the ladder. So the top transfer is obviously going to be positive, where the bottom is going to be the opposite. It will be negative. But so we know that this ladder height is 0.96, which is basically half of that is 0.48. And then our platform, which is the third transform, I have this set to, we have the top at 0.48 for this ladder. I have it down a smidgen so that it's like right here lined up with, if you remember in the tile map, we basically brought in our custom physics shape. So the actual top where the collision happens is actually 1 pixel below, like right there. So I have it lined up with that so that it's all nice and even. So when he starts running, he does like bounce a little bit. So it's all nice and even with that. So it's down 0.01. And then the platform consists of just these two components. I have an edge collider, which is basically the size of the tile. So this is we go based off the middle. So the left, negative 0.08. So we know a tile is 0.16. So we're going to go 0.08 to the left and 0.08 to the right. So that's basically the size of the edge collider that I use. And then we use a platform effector. The collider mask, I only have the player. So the player is the only one that's going to basically be affected by this collider mask here. So if I have an enemy that actually walks over the top of the ladder, they're going to fall through if their box collider is small enough. So if you want to get that off, if you wanted to have the top of your ladder so that the enemies wouldn't fall through, then you're going to want to put the enemy on there too, so they can walk across the top. So that's up to you. How you want to design your game and everything. So that Camadoma would actually fall through there because it's small enough too. And the other part is this is a one-way, so once I go up, it's not going to block me in, and then if I get up to the top, I can stand on top of it. So that's the point of that. So now to the actual prefab. So I have the prefab of the ladder over here. I put it in an environment, and I'm going to double click on it. So if I zoom in here real quick, it's very simple. I mean, I don't actually keep the sprite in the ladder object. I lay the ladder object on top of whatever I've already drawn in the scene, so I don't want to bind my my game object here with any sprites or anything like that. So I'll do the drawing somewhere else, and then I can just resize this and position everything after the fact. So all these ladders are actually laying on top of the tile map. And so that's how I wanted to handle it. If you want, you can add a sprite renderer in here and put in your ladder and have it adjust to the height and everything like that. But I decided I'd rather just lay them out there and put them on top and change all the positions and everything so that they're you don't see them, but you see the ladder, but they're just on top of it, so it's separated. And so this is all there is. It's the top, the bottom, and the platform with the edge collider and the edge collider and the platform effector. So that's basically how I built out the ladder object. Also, the platform, I set it to the ground layer because obviously when it gets up to the top, you want to be able to see if he's hitting the ground or not. So if you don't do that, you might get some false positives. If you actually came off of here and landed on top of this, he wouldn't switch to his grounded state. So just keep that in mind. So I have that set to the round layer. So that's basically the ladder object. So for you, all you would do is just create an object, add all these things in there, add in the ladder script to the parent here, and then you can make a prefab out of it. You just drag it in, and then you can make a prefab. And then all you got to do then at that point is you just draw your ladders all over the place, wherever you need them. So like I have the other one up here, the third one, which is here. Now this map, this isn't part of the original Bomb Man stage. I actually kind of just drew this out, and this is all going to disappear for the finale. But I just wanted to do it over here so you can see a ladder above another ladder and a ladder to the side, and you can see how they all interact with each other. So that is ladder climbing in a nutshell. So you should be able to go up and go down and fall off and then touch the ground and get above it, go up the one above that, and etc., etc. So I am going to, let's just take a look at the other parts. I'm going to bring this over, and we're going to go through the scene. There's going to be some glitches like that. That's because the box collider, moves around when he's moving. So don't worry about that. That's actually the next video to fix all those types of little things. So I'm going to go over to the other ladder. So I actually put the other ladders in play for the other parts of the scene, and you're going to notice some things that are kind of like the transitions where the transition doesn't quite work right. That's because once I get past it, I need to reposition it. So, and then the whole animation, when I animate up the ladder, he doesn't actually animate. That's a part of the fixes as well. So then I'm going to come up here, and then you're going to see I just got shifted over. It's because my box collider is still too big. So that's part of the fixes. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go down my ladder, let go, up, go down, go up. I'm going to shoot off my ladder, and go up. And then we're going to go up to the next transition. And then we're going to go here. I just wanted to do this real quick so you can see all the other ladders in action. So we built this stage out in the tile maps video. So up there. This is where all the gabioles will be. We're going to jump up here through the next one. This is where the killer bomb should start flying by. We're going to grab that ladder. We're going to let go. So we're going to hit the jump key. So if I press down, I can hit jump as many times as I want, but while I'm pressing up or down, it's not going to do that. But if I let go of the up or down and press jump, he's going to let go. So that's reset climbing. Ooh, almost exploded right there. So now we're going to go up. Next transition. And then this is where Mambu would come out. We're going to come over here, another ladder. And I'm a little too big for this, so I have to actually jump to get a little bit narrow. That's part of the problem that's going to be resolved. Because my box colliders were made for the other resolution, so I'm going to actually kind of tighten them up. So I'm going to jump through there. And then I got this big ladder here. Go up to the top of my ladder there. And let go. Fly through. Catch it. Drop. Catch it. Drop, catch. Drop, catch. This is one real big ladder. And then I'm going to fall through, and right here I get trapped in there because that's not actually supposed to close yet. And that's part of the animation with the final boss scene, so no big deal. So anyway, that's the ladders in action for this part. We're going to switch over to the main scene now because I want you to see it over there in the 16:9 resolution. So I will be right back in a second. Alright, so now we're on the main scene. Now I've added a special ladder and a special part of the scene in here. Now, I'm not going to go over how I created it because you can go download the project and check out the code and everything like that and do it yourself. So I'm going to play this. But what I'm going to do though is that music drives me nuts sometimes. So we're going to just turn this off for now, and then we're going to let go. So I'm going to come through here, grab the one up, jump down here, jump up here, we're going to jump here. We're going to come over here and nothing. What I have here, if I can get onto it, is an invisible ladder. Ooh. So you can add in an invisible ladder if you want to take you somewhere special. So I'm going to the city in the clouds, although there's really no city. So now I'm up in the clouds, where I can jump around, all kinds of fun stuff. So I have an invisible ladder that I can climb to take me somewhere, and then I can let go and plant myself. So anyway, I wanted to throw that in there just so that we can see that it works over here in this scale too. And all I did with that was I added in obviously a bunch of clouds, but I got this one ladder, which if I come over here, it's right here. You can see my lines involved. So there's my there's the bottom of my ladder with the offset, and this I didn't change the height of this sprite, but it's okay. It's not a big deal. I don't. You want to change your climb height sprite too. And then there's the top right there, the top handler, and then there's the platform. And if I look at my grounds here, my ground is basically just a big long edge effector right there. You can't see. Or I'm sorry, edge collider with a platform effector so I can come up through it. And that's my cloud. So that's my changes to the main scene, just so that I can have a ladder here. But you wouldn't know it because it's invisible. Anyway, that brings me to the end of the video, and I really hope that you found it useful and it helps you with your ladder building. When I was doing this a long time ago, trying to build ladders, it was like, I just felt like there's a lot of things that are missing. People don't cover every aspect. And yeah, I know everyone wants to pump out a 10-minute video or 7-minute video or whatever, and they just give you like a scratch of the surface, but don't really, I wanted to make something in this case where it kind of covers as much as possible. So I want to show you how you climb up on the ladder, how to get back down from when you're above the ladder, and then climbing up and climbing down and getting onto the platform effector, and then you're your platform is, you're on the platform, you can run across, you're on the top of the ladder. The only thing I don't really cover is what if you have a ladder and it's above your ground and you don't want to actually climb off. I mean, if you want something like that, I mean, I could probably put out a side project or something like that, where once you get up to the top of the ladder, it doesn't let you, go beyond the top of the ladder, and then you have to basically jump off to get onto the platform that's slightly below the ladder. So we can do that, but this one, you climb up, you get to the top of it, and you can stand on top of the ladder. And then you can shoot while you're on the ladder. I can press space fall to catch myself onto the ladder. Right? And stuff like that. I can use my magnet beam, jump onto it. So that's basically, ladders in a nutshell. So I try to cover as many aspects of building the ladder out, and you might have to just get the project to kind of look at the code, because I kind of went through it kind of quick, and sometimes I don't explain things all that well. But I think once you get an idea of how it works, and it may help you with your project. So anyway, that's the end. So if you like it, give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, then please subscribe. Actually, I only have 2 more videos, and then that's where I'm calling it wraps. No more Mega Man, at least for the mainstream series. After that, I won't have any set schedule of any future videos that I put out. But there are about 3 or 4, I think, that are requests that people want, like the dashing ability or the slide or something, things like that. and another enemy that does like in a different version of Mega Man 6 or something like that. Those are requests that I'll put videos out, but they won't be part of this mainstream because they're not. I'm doing this original Mega Man. So code's up on GitHub, links in the description. So stay safe out there, and I will catch you at the next video. Goodbye.